Today we're going to talk about reasons to sell a stock. Um, and this is something that a lot of people struggle with. I personally think that this is the hardest part of investing. Most people know how to buy a great stock. The question is, when should you let it go? Deciding sometimes when to keep a stock and when to sell it is very, very difficult. And I lean back to a quote by Phil Fisher. And Phil Fisher said that if we do the job of buying a stock right, then the time to sell it is almost never. But almost means that sometimes you should. So today, that's what we're going to try and figure out. And whenever you talk to investors or read anything or watch any videos about investing, you'll see a lot about when to buy a stock, things to look at like valuation or management, the balance sheet. And these are all really important, but when you ask investors or look at when they sell, that list tends to be pretty blank. So the first reason is if the facts changed or if you were just wrong. Even the best investors are wrong. Francois Rochon says 1 out of 3 times, but everybody's going to be wrong. And when the facts change or there's an issue, you have to decide if this problem is temporary or permanent. So, some examples of potentially temporary problems: maybe there's some currency fluctuations. Maybe your company doesn't do business in the country where you live, or maybe they do business internationally. Maybe the economy is just going down. Maybe it's not your company. Maybe everything is struggling. There's a recession. Maybe your company makes products like, say, toasters. Maybe there's a problem with the toasters. And maybe there's a product recall. Well, if that's not your company's only source of income, that's something they can fix. That's a temporary problem. But not all problems are temporary. So think about photography. Kodak was once the dominant camera company. They sold the most film. They were the company for photography. And then digital photography came along, and Kodak didn't adapt. And that became a permanent problem. Kodak relied a lot on film sales. They didn't adapt to digital photography, and the business went into decline. So, red flags, things like falling sales, new debt, that sort of thing can be a permanent problem. Reason number 2 is if a better opportunity needs the capital. Good investing is all about thinking about opportunity costs. And what that means is just balancing what you're investing in with what you don't invest in. So you can think about it this way. If you have $1 and you're going to spend it, you could spend it on some kind of, good, something like these snazzy shoes. But you could also spend that dollar in your investment account. Maybe you could buy something, in this example, like a 10-year treasury, maybe a bond at, a 4% yield. Well, if you buy the shoes, your opportunity cost is the 4% that you're not going to get. Third, these are some good problems to have. If your stock grows so large that you can't sleep at night, that's a reason maybe not to sell out, but to think about trimming. You know, it it's going to depend on you how much you can handle, but it's also probably going to depend on the volatility of the stock. Here's a position that's a reasonable portion of this portfolio, but this guy's sleeping just fine. Well, let's say this grows and it grows and it grows, and it becomes so large that it keeps him awake. Amazon's a really good one to think about here. It's done very, very well, but it's also had some major volatility. We're talking drawdowns of over 80%. And if you sell the whole thing because you can't handle it, well, you miss out on all those gains. So this is maybe a reason to trim. Last is if the price, you can't justify it no matter what you assume about the company. And this one's tricky. A stock can look expensive and still keep going up. I mean, Amazon again is a good example. But with us as dividend investors, especially, what we're really balancing here is the capital gains versus the dividend payments. So if you have a stock that you bought, say at a 3% yield, and it's gone crazy and it's yielding, 0.25%, and you could sell and get 30 years worth of dividend payments out of it, that may make sense. Depending on your goals and where you are in life, that could be a good decision. So what did we learn today? Well, selling rules are just as important as buying rules, and you need them so that your emotions don't end up making the call. You should always be thinking about opportunity costs, and you shouldn't watch your portfolio every single day or minute by minute, but check it every now and then, see how things are doing. The goal isn't to never sell, it's to build wealth that lasts. So be patient, be smart, and be ready. If you want a copy of this drawing to remind you of these things, there is a link in the description. You can go ahead and download it. And if you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And let me know in the comments, do you have sell rules already, or is this something that you need to establish for yourself? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.